nice big finish to the year for England and South Africa as well. It's going to be an incredibly physical game. Charles, you had a close eye on their win over Italy at the weekend. What did you make of them? It sounds like they really turned it on in the second half.
They really did. Second half, they were fantastic, really, really strong, and they got Willy le Roux into the game as the second playmaker. Damien Willems was forced to move out onto the wing after Cheslin Colby, I think, did his hamstring as he scored the try. As he scored his phenomenal try.
It was an amazing try, yeah.
Fantastic try. And then Manny Libut came on at 10, and they looked really good as the dual playmaker. Willy le Roux, might have lost a yard of pace, he's getting old. But he really offered them a lot more in terms of creativity and width to sort of bring their bigger strike runners into the game out wide. First half, they looked rattled, though. They looked rattled like they did in the first half against France, and Italy looked like there could be a shock on the cards. But, I mean, how big a game is it now this weekend for both England and South Africa in terms of the landscape of their autumn, because one of those two teams is only going to have won one game this autumn, even if they draw, one of those teams is only going to have won one game this autumn, and it's going to be against either Italy or Japan. So one of those two teams is looking at losses across the board, except for against sort of comparatively speaking, minnows.
But I thought England beat New Zealand on Saturday, or is that just my brain playing tricks?
Brain. Just
my brain playing tricks on me. Should just clarify that because this game falls out of the release window for November, South Africa will not have a lot of their European-based players available for selection. So that includes Cheslin Colby, Andre Esterhuizen, Vincent Koch, Trevor Nyakani, Kobus Reinet and Jasper Wiese of Leicester as well. It doesn't affect the Japanese-based players because the Japanese season hasn't started yet. That doesn't start until next month. So that's quite a large contingent of players that the Springboks are going to be without, and that certainly might have a bit of an effect. But even so, the big hitters are coming, aren't they? Etzebeth, Khaleesi, all those guys. Charlie, to win this game, this final test of the year, what would it mean for England after a fairly up and down year? Probably summed up by the fact that they've won one, lost one and drawn one in this November series so far.
Yeah, but as we keep saying, a year where England have been treading water. I think for both previous, you got obviously another rematch from the last World Cup final, even though they've played kind of in the interim. And as much as it's a bit silly to be talking about World Cup cycles as a whole, especially when you consider where South Africa came from to win the last one. It feels significant as far as either of these sides going into World Cup year with a little bit of momentum. Would be a huge result for South Africa, would be a huge psychological blow for England to lose to a team, given that they've lost those players. There's no Dwayne Vermeulen either, obviously, he's just not selected. So yeah, significant, I'd say. Mario Toji gave quite an interesting answer as to what he expects from South Africa, and he just said the same as their very first international game ever, which is going to be breakdown pressure, line speed, a good kicking game, pressure everywhere effectively, big pressure on the line out, big pressure on the scrum. I think in the second half against Italy, we saw a little bit of an expansion, didn't we?
Definitely.
Willy le Roux is just such an important player for them, and as you say, Manny Libut was class off the bench. That zip on his distribution looked like it gave. He looked like he'd been around for 20 tests.
Yeah,
I mean, really assured.
He must be close to the starting jersey at Twickenham.
Yeah,
Twickenham this week. He really must be.
And if South Africa have those blend of threats, I think it's going to be really, really tough no matter who they're playing.
His opposite number this weekend, I mean, how significant a game is it for Marcus Smith as well against South Africa? Because the equivalent game last year was sort of his coming-of-age match on the international stage, wasn't it? How he ran those last 10 minutes for England against South Africa, and obviously they won that game. For him to sort of not take the game by the scruff of the neck this weekend, it might, comparatively speaking, seem a bit sort of a couple of steps back.
Yeah, well, it's been a fascinating year, hasn't it? And I think Jones has been criticised for picking players and not quite managing to kind of develop their careers. If you think about Ollie Lawrence, if you think about Ben Earl, he's stuck with Marcus Smith, and it was a significant selection, I think, to keep him starting for the last game, and I think Smith rewarded him. I think if we want a real, I think England will kick more. They haven't been kicking that much this autumn because they've been clearly trying to develop this phase play, knowing because Jones is kind of, I think in his head he thinks that the next World Cup is going to be about a little bit more about possession, or at least being able to play that way. But I hope that they stick with that and they try and kind of get around the we don't know what the weather forecast is yet, but if they can outflank that new South Africa blitz, or they try to do that. I think that would be a really interesting kind of clash of styles as well.
Yeah, Novi Mulin's a good point, because obviously Novi Mulin, no visa, so what would they do at number 8? Will they go with Quagga? Yeah. Will they give Evan Roos a go? There's a lot of excitement about him in South Africa as well, so there's a selection debate there.
It's really funny, isn't it? They lost 2 tight heads. They'll be sweet.
Oh yeah,
don't worry.
Yeah, that's not.
They've lost 3 excellent number 8s. They'll be sweet.
That's not an issue. Yeah, that's going to be fine.
Not to be underestimated.
One thing if Eddie Jones is true to his word, one thing we do know will happen with England is that they will go back to 3 line-out jumpers, because he said that as much post-match after the win against New Zealand. This is a game where England want to compete in the line-out, and they want to be able to give South Africa a good test there. So are we expecting Maro back to 6? David Ribbons for a start after his you said offload of the century earlier. That offload keeps getting top billing, and all of it sounds fairly accurate. Like I can't really dispute.
I think it was the surprise, wasn't it? It was completely out of nowhere, wasn't it? Well, as in, we've all watched David Ribbons play a lot, and I was ecstatic to see him get called up, and I'm ecstatic to see him included. But I don't think any of us really, in our heart of hearts, thought that he had that in him, or expected to see that from him off the bench against New Zealand in such a clutch moment.
Will Hobbs on Twitter: Dave Ribbons offloads the most outrageously skillful pass by an England player this millennium. Discuss. You can have it. I can't think of another one.
Certainly by a forward.
Yeah,
I'll take it. Yeah, it could be a big week for Somerset West in the Western Capes. David Ribbons against his country. We have got a couple of questions on the England selection, so I should get into them. Is the England back row quietly becoming an issue, with Lords sidelined indefinitely and Vunipola looking a shadow of his 2019 best? The balance seems off. Surely the jackal threat of Jack Willis over a third line-out specialist and Don Brandt or Zach Mercer offer more dynamism at number 8, and that's a question from Matt. Is the back row balance a little bit confusing at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's almost as if they've got a bit tangled with it. I mean, I think I flagged this last week, Charles, but you asked Eddie the question direct whether why isn't he going back to Curry at 6 and using him as a kind of an out-and-out blindside flanker, using him more in the line-out. That was an area. The line-out was just a bit messy, wasn't it, for England on Saturday? So they were clearly used to playing with a jumper at 6, and maybe it's just a familiarity thing that they go back there. Shows how important Courtney Lawes has been for them. I think if you think about Jack Willis, if you want your players if you want as many elite skill sets and skill sets such a grim term, isn't it? But if you want many elite kind of super strengths, and that's another grim term, on the pitch at once, his jackling really counts as that, because it really is elite.
Yeah, it is.
And it's an interesting kind of another question we got. Is it that is Curry kind of he came to life in that last kind of quarter, really, even before that last 10 minutes, but he has been reasonably quiet, and whether whether that's just the moving parts of the back row, whether he hasn't got Sam Underhill there, hasn't got Lewis Ludlam there, who's combined well with in the past. It's an interesting time, because as much as Jones billed New Zealand's back row as a acid test, this week's not going to get much easier.
No, and I mean the balance does feel slightly off, but I think ironically this week might be the time to actually leave Willis alone and leave him out and actually go with the 3 locks, because you're going to need that extra weight. You're going to need that extra line-out presence against South Africa, especially with everything that they bring. They like picking Moster at 6. They like often going with 3 locks, and especially with Pieter-Steph du Toit also out. There's a good chance that they will come with 3 locks, and you have to match that, I think. And yeah, the balance has been slightly off, and you're right. Curry has been quiet. I mean, I still think that Jack Willis should have a place in that out and out England starting 15. I don't think this week is the week for him and for that, and to chuck him in. But yeah, blindside has perennially been a bit of an issue. I think for Eddie Jones. I think the Curry Underhill partnership, there was stability there. There was a great balance with Billy Vunipola. I mean, Courtney Lawes, no matter how well he played, and yes, he was captain, it did seem like he was a stopgap 6, and he did seem like a lock, and it did seem like they were just playing a lock at 6. So the back row balance, not quite there post-2019, and time running out to get it right ahead of 2023.
Simon Dixon asked the question about Curry. Really interesting. Someone like what they give for someone like Ted Hill to come on strong at Bath. I think it's really interesting. Just last one for me to mention. Zach Mercer. Obviously can't pick him yet per regs, but becomes available for the World Cup warm-up games and will surely have a look in. I wonder whether, if you think of Simmons and that back row that started on Saturday, Zach Mercer's probably more of an authentic line-out option than Simmons. So Simmons Curry, Billy Vunipola sounds spicy, doesn't it? Whether that gets a look in one of the warm-up games, I'm not sure.
You two at Twickenham, what did you think of Sam Simmons? Me watching on TV and the replay, I thought he was quiet. Went about his business, but without a mega impact.
It's so difficult to know and to kind of, for a couple of reasons. One, first time that he's started with Billy, had any meaning. He was on at the end against Japan with Billy Vunipola, but you need to build that cohesion. I mean, if you think about how him and Dave Ewers dovetail, it's developed over years, right? And then the second thing is just how many different ways that England would shoot themselves in the foot. Really didn't kind of build any momentum in the game.
First half, particularly, they just played to none of their strengths. All of their strengths were taken
Simmons
away.
got stripped for Ioane's try. That was how the turnover came about, which is a kind of a glaring thing that you could point to, and things kind of looked up for England after Scott Barrett, and then Papali'i went off. So it was Satutu and Frizzell on at the end, wasn't it?
You talk about playing to his strengths. I mean, he's one of the quickest back row forwards in the world, we might say, really, in world rugby in terms of back row forwards. We haven't seen it ball in hand once this autumn, really, and we certainly didn't see it on Saturday. Is he being used properly? I mean, because for my money, you'd say not, really. I mean, I'm not saying that a whole game plan needs to revolve around him, but surely there are more ingenious ways of using him ball in hand to exploit that pace.
It's one of those selections where I thought he was okay. I don't think they got the best out of him, and equally it wouldn't shock me if we never ever saw England use it ever again, having him at 6 and Vunipola at 8, one of those that just gets consigned to the selection dustbin.